Hi, everyone. Welcome to Parenting in the Trenches. Today, as we talk about challenging our parenting beliefs, I am Dr. Tania Farran here with my partner, Dr. Q. You go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's Dr. Misbha Qureshi here, coming live from Towson, Maryland. And I have to tell you, the weather was feeling beautiful today. I had a sweater on, I had my scarf on, and then when I came outside, I'm like, oh my God, ta-da! I got in the car and I was so happy to see the warmer weather, to feel the warmer weather. Because, oh man, this cold.
I know it was beautiful today here in Missouri. So it was absolutely beautiful here in Missouri. And I loved it. I actually sat and had my lunch on my back patio. It was that beautiful
Wow,
out. The sun
nice.
felt amazing, just amazing.
Yeah.
So tell everybody a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you guys know, some of you who have been following the I Choose Us series, Dr. Tanya and I started our Parenting in the Trenches earlier this year. So, this is our second live episode. And as she mentioned, we are going to be talking about challenging our parenting beliefs today. And why? Because it matters. Because it's a struggle out there. Okay. And
Absolutely.
both of us obviously are in the professional work of healing communities on two different systems level, but they're all both integrated together. So I myself am on the clinical mental health side of doing work with individual families, couples, parents, children, adults, you name it. And at Umid Center, we provide therapeutic services, healing services for those that walk into this door, and we do it as a community. So when Dr. Tanya and I connected, I was like, oh my God, you're an educator and you actually like working with parents. Me too. So I do the clinical work here in Towson, Maryland. I have Umid Center for Healing Relationships that has been open for about 2 years physically, but I am a practicing marriage and family therapist for the past 20 years. That is my niche. That is what I love doing. If I had to pick and choose, it would be family therapy and couples therapy all the way. I like the more the merrier in the room. I like putting pieces to the puzzle together. And from a therapeutic therapist standpoint, I would love to have a lot more pieces of the puzzle in my room versus just one big piece, right? So my team often shies away from family and couples therapy, and I just dive in. So we came up with Parenting in the Trenches together because we saw the value in our collaboration. And for those of you out there who are parents, who've been doing the parenting for a while, who are thinking about becoming parents, right? We discussed parenting is a lifetime journey as our first topic, and here we are for a second series. So I think that's enough of an introduction, Dr. Tanya.
It's a pretty good introduction. I love that. I will tell you a little bit about me. I am in education for 30 something years, as Dr. Misbah has said. And absolutely my favorite part of that whole day is working with families and working with parents and kids and helping them overcome some of the challenges that they may have with traditional education or their education, in general. I've been an administrator from elementary all the way through high school. So I've worked with every age range of children as well as every dynamic of family. I think that there is possible to have. And so I still love all of that. And I've loved partnering with Dr. Q because It's fun, and we have fun together. We get into here and we start talking, and then we plan the session, and then we go, oh, okay, that's a lot. Let's save that for another time, or we get too excited about it. And so, we're both passionate about the same things, and just in different areas and different realms. And I think that is what makes this so much fun. And we've got about an hour with you. Last time we kind of ran out of some time. So we want to let you know, those of you in the audience, please feel free to share out some information or questions or your thoughts as we're going through. We would love to have your interaction. But as she had said, we had our first session last month, January 28th, I believe it was. You can go to Creative Living Ideas YouTube channel, and you can see it there, and would love for you to go back and watch it. So the topic was parenting is a lifetime commitment. And so that was the very first one that we did together. So excited to get into this topic. So let's talk about parenting beliefs.
Yeah. So as I was listening to you, Dr. Tania, one of the questions that I had come up was, you've talked about your journey, right? As an educator, you've talked about your book a little bit, which I think we want to talk a little bit more about because it's an amazing resource out there, right?
Yes.
Yet I was curious how you got into the field because, I have a backstory, and my backstory is pretty simple. I became a family therapist because I couldn't figure out why my family did what they did. Okay. I was a curious child. Things did not make sense to me. And I'm like, I'm going to find out. There has to be an answer to why these people move the way that they moved. And as I'm thinking about today's topic, I'm also like, yo, some of those parenting beliefs, my parents were clueless.
Yes.
Because we were also shifting culturally. So they were raised in a Pakistani household with Pakistani cultural parenting beliefs.
Yes.
They had to transition into the States. It's a whole different, it's like another planet for them.
Sure.
Right? So imagine when you are born in a certain geographical location and you're trying to figure out the day in and day out of generational differences and what you want to take with you, what you don't. And then on top of that, you have another layer of another culture that you know nothing about.
Right.
But you're also running away from that culture.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So my parents, I ain't gonna lie, left me confused a lot of times. I'm like, this ain't working, Mom and Dad, but you know what? You keep on believing that it's working.
It's going to work. Exactly. I know. That's funny.
So
go ahead.
What I was thinking is like, I know why I got into family therapy. How'd you end up being an educator?
It's funny. My husband and I were just talking about that the other day. And really, when I was going to school, I mean, I'm not that old, but when I was going to school, there were not a lot of paths for women. There really weren't. You could go into nursing, you could go into education, some people got psychology degrees, but mostly you were a teacher or you were in the healthcare field, and that was pretty much it. But I did always love being a teacher and playing school when I was a kid. I loved that. I would, didn't have a chalkboard or dry erase board. I would put paper up on my closet door, and I would write on it and tear it all down and put it all back up. And, I loved that piece of it. My mom was in education. She always wanted to be a teacher. She went into classes, but then she was an at-home mom. And, it just wasn't the time when a lot of women got degrees back then. And so, she loved it. She's a natural teacher. I've always said that. And she edited my book. And I'm telling you that every time she was going through my book, she was writing, "You're your child's first teacher. You are your child's first teacher." Like, she just kept reiterating that. And, she has always said, she'll say things like, "I learned how to become a better parent by shadowing you when you were being a teacher, by watching the other teachers in your building, she was a teacher's aide growing up." So, she said, I feel like I became a better parent once you were an adult watching everything like that. So there is a lot to parenting beliefs with that. But I sort of, I didn't go to school traditionally. I went to school, hated it. I absolutely hated college, quit, got married, and then went back to school and absolutely loved it and knew I was ready to go then. And my husband and I talked about that. I said, I think, you just get to a point where you're finally just ready to receive it. And I started going into education and I loved it. And then I started going into administration and I loved it even more. But one of the things that I loved the most about education were the kids who were, struggling, who were having family challenges, who were having academic challenges, social, emotional challenges. I was always drawn to those kids. I enjoyed talking to them. I enjoyed getting to know them. If I saw a kid in the office in second grade, I knew they were going to be in my room in fifth grade. And I was fine with that because by second grade, I was already building a relationship with them and we were going to have an easy transition into my classroom and we were going to have an amazing year. And I absolutely loved that piece. And so then I transitioned to principal because I was hoping to help more families. So then I was writing my book because I kept telling parents the same things, the same successful strategies to start utilizing at home. And again, I always say that my book is the tip of the iceberg. It is the springboard for conversation, get you started talking about it. So yeah, that's kind of how I kind of fell into that. And I don't think that there's such thing as perfect parenting. My book is called A Parent's Manual. But it's just like anything else. It's a manual, but we're still going to have to troubleshoot some things. You're still going to have to figure it out. It's not every detail go from here to here to here to here. It's not a diagram, but it's to get you talking. It's to get you thinking. And I love that. Yeah. Well, we've got some amazing people already in the audience. So thank you, Jackie, for joining us. Thank you, Christy, for being here. Dr. Gwendolyn, I love this. This gal, she's amazing. And she's just all about education. So thank you so much for, the work that you do in education. She's hot on TikTok. So if you're on TikTok, check out Dr. Gwendolyn Levert. All right. Muhammad, thank you for joining us. And Nick, hey, thanks for being here. Appreciate you.
Yeah, it's so good to see all these beautiful people joining us for this very important topic, right? So, and again, Dr. Tania, I just realized, and I knew this, but I just put it together. 3 of my aunts are actually teachers back home.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 2 of them are deceased. May their soul rest in peace. My 2 other aunts, my father's sisters, they're actually teachers. So I also come from a generation of women educators in Pakistan. Yeah. And in that generation, oh my God, that was a huge thing because that's like 1 generation above me, even 2 to some extent. So they say that being an educator, as an adult, right? As a human, each and every one of us is a teacher, is an educator, right? Mm-hmm. So even when you look at parenting and children relationships, your parents are your first teachers.
They are.
And then think about the role that older siblings have, right? Yes. The younger siblings look up to you. They want to be like you, even if you have no style, okay? Your younger sibling wants to be like you.
You'll never be as old as that oldest sibling, and you're always striving to be it. I was the youngest, so I get it. Yeah, see, so you're the one you're leading the show, and we're like looking to you, like, now what? What do we do next?
Yeah, so each one of us has a teacher and educator in us, right? Which is why it's even more important for us to be moving mindfully and intentionally, because there are people looking at us as role models, right? Mm-hmm. So what makes things a little bit complicated is when we have to live in a world where there is pain and there's wounds. And when you have pain and wounds and trauma, it's hard to show up in all the healthy ways that we need, right? And that's where parenting in the trenches comes in, right? It's tough work in the trenches.
It is. Right? It is.
So as we transition into talking about challenging our parenting beliefs, one of the reasons that we thought this topic was very important is because I know, at least in my clinical work, I'm constantly pushing through or pushing past some of the maladaptive parenting beliefs that people hang on to that impacts their parenting. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, what are we talking about when we're talking about parenting beliefs? What is a belief to you? So everybody that's joined, please feel free to put your thoughts out there around beliefs. How are beliefs formed? Where do they come from? What is a parenting belief that you have or have heard of that you think works or doesn't work? So let's get some interactions and some engagement here in the room.
Absolutely. Yeah. So drop in some of the things that you think are a parenting belief for us to go through, and we'll tell you some of the things that we are have been talking about a little bit, kind of on the side, about some different parenting beliefs, like things like parents are never wrong; they're always right.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty common parenting belief, right? I'm always right. And some of it can be some stubbornness too. We were talking about this yesterday, and there's and I like that when we were discussing yesterday when we were prepping for this is that belief versus generation. So oftentimes, like we were saying, our parents learned their parenting beliefs from their parents, from where they're raised. Your parents were raised in Pakistan. You were partially raised in Pakistan, brought over here. My parents were raised in a 1940, 50 parenting belief. And then here I'm being raised in the 80s, with 1950 parenting beliefs, right? So there's these beliefs that happen as our parents are growing. And a lot of times, and I talk about this often with my book, finding new ways to learn about parenting, joining parenting communities like what we are giving you right now and having you be a part of, are ways for you to open your minds and to learn some new things. I can tell you that, I felt like I had so much experience in parenting from the years of education and the number of families, the hundreds of thousands of parents that I've worked with.
Mm-hmm.
But until I got on these platforms and I met people who were raised in a Jewish community in Israel, someone like you raised in Pakistan with Pakistani parents, their cultures of raising were very different. And so my whole world opened up even bigger than I thought that it could. And I love that. Well, we've got some good ones in here. Oh my gosh. So here we go. Thank you, Nick, for commenting on what your definition of parenting beliefs. It's partly our experiences of how we were raised. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We only know that, right? We were raised in this household. We're kind of sheltered in this household. We think that's the only thing. And then we get out into the world and our ideas expand. We go to college. We learn about other people, other families. We have other friends. Then we go into the workplace, and then we become parents ourselves. Mm-hmm. Here's a parenting belief: do as I say, not as I do. Like that. Children should not be heard, does not work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that ties into, you don't have a voice. Like, it's adults are talking.
Yes.
Right? Do not disturb. Like, do not intervene. It's a conversation between adults.
And not heard. Should be seen and not heard. Correct. Yep. Yes.
Yep.
Dr. Gwendolyn, I'm going to go ahead and put yours up here. It's pretty big. I'm going to leave it up for a second for people to read. Amazing.
Yeah. Well, this, thank you for sharing your story, Dr. Gwendolyn. And what I want to highlight right there is what you're really speaking to is the struggle, right? The struggle is real. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about value of education, right? One of the things that Dr. Tania and I were talking about like yesterday was the difference between beliefs and values. a lot of time people use those two words interchangeably, because we were even like, wait, that kind of sounds like a value. I was like, but no, it's really,
Right.
it's a
We
belief,
did.
right? People
Yeah.
beliefs are a value, but
Right.
there is a clear distinction between belief and value, right? And for me, when I unpacked it and kind of like did a deep dive in understanding it, to me, beliefs can change over time as your perspective in life changes, as you evolve, as you gain knowledge.
Yes, I was going to say your experience. Once you
Mhm.
start gaining experiences, just like I said, I had all this experience of working with so many different families and family dynamics. And then I started coming out into this global world, talking to parents, starting out on Clubhouse, having conversations, hosting parenting rooms. And really, the model is different in a lot of places. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of beliefs in a lot of places that, also don't kind of mesh with that belief and the new generation. It's not working very well, which is why we're seeing a lot of conflict with that oftentimes. Um, Gwendolyn adds a little bit more about economics have changed parenting beliefs.
Mhm.
And thank you, Nicole, for sharing this. Culture plays a big part. She got the pot spoons. I understand.
Yeah, we can also talk about the concept of parentification, but that's probably going to be another episode. The oldest child who is parentified. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think so too. I think so too. So some of the other ones that we had talked about were, don't talk back to your parents.
Mhm.
Parents know best because I said so, kind of that thing. Parent knows the best. You have to do this because I said so. I am
Mhm.
always right. I'm the parent. I'm always right. And that's how my parents did it, and it worked. So those are some of the beliefs that we talked about. And so what do you think, Dr. Q, why do you think some of these beliefs can't hold up in this generation anymore?
Oh, oh, oh.
Let me open the can of
I'm
worms.
like getting my chair ready. Well, there's a lot of different things. Yet I think one of the biggest things that I've seen is finding your voice. I think the next generation, right, of kids are recognizing early on that they have a voice, they have a say, right? So when their parents come back and tell them to do something a certain way, or they're feeling a certain way, or they have an opinion on how something should go, you're not getting that response that you once used to get, which is, okay, well, my mom and dad said no, so it's a no. Instead, they're asking, well, can you tell us why? And these are like logical questions. They're not even trying to be smart, they're trying to find the rationale behind it. And usually in those situations, what happens, right? The parents don't have a logic reason to say no. So they're like, well, because I said so. And
Right. Right.
I remember getting that a lot growing up, like, especially when there was gender inequality between my brothers and myself. Like, in terms of things, right? In terms of getting the first cell phone, in terms of getting the first car, or getting your life, like those things that mattered, right? I never got a correct answer. I never got a logical answer on why I couldn't do something other than, well, you're a Muslim girl, you need to stay at home. And it didn't make sense to me, which is why, I did what I did and I became a family therapist to be an advocate, right? But it never made sense to me because I didn't know where it was coming from. So part of what you're
Right.
seeing is that children are recognizing, and of course, there's parents out there that are teaching them to advocate for themselves, to have a voice, right? So I think that's one piece. I think the second piece is social media. Social media is exposing our children to a lot of things, both good and bad. But when they are seeing wrong things happening, they're able to call you out on it. right?
Yeah, I do think so. So I want to say a couple of things. I think that a lot of these topics didn't work back in 1950, 1920 anyway. I
Mhm,
don't think that they were effective. I think they
mhm,
just weren't challenged. And I don't think that they were effective parenting strategies either, or beliefs. And so I still don't think that they were appropriate back then. But I do think that because, like you were saying, you know, we're more global now. Our kids are more global than they used to be. And so they're learning more things and they're being open to the world a lot earlier. Now,
mhm,
with that being said, I don't think that, the phrase don't talk back to your parents. I think there's a politeness, right? That we have to teach our kids that if you want to have a voice, there's a certain way maybe to come back and to share what you want or a route to do that. But that all frames in this box of parenting, right? It is an action that we have to always do with our kids is take
yeah,
the time to teach them.
mhm,
And so part of parenting means giving your kids that opportunity to come back with a statement and to share, why they feel the way about something. Doesn't mean you're always going to give it to them. That doesn't mean they're always going to quote win or whatever, however you look at it as a competition, but teaching them how to have a voice appropriately is okay
mhm,
to do. It wasn't a long time ago, and it still isn't in some cultures, in some households.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a power dynamic there, right? So when we're looking at
Yes.
parent-child relationship, there's a hierarchy there, rightfully so, right? And your book talks about that too, Dr. Tanya. You're
Yes.
not friends with your kids.
No, you're
You
not.
should be friendly,
Yes.
right? You should have spent time with them where they can be comfortable with you. They can show up authentically, but you are not your kid's friend.
Right.
And when we see those dynamics, then they never work out because
No, they do not.
parents find themselves in situations where their kids are triangulating, where their kids are manipulating, where they come back and they say, Dr. Q, you know what? I told them a little too much because they're throwing it in my face now. They'd be like, well, you did this too. I'm like, well, you shouldn't be telling them what you were doing in your teenage adolescent years anyway. That's what you get. Because now
And
you're
that
going to
was
be like,
then.
yeah, Mom, how you gonna tell me I can't smoke a joint? You were doing
That's right. That's right.
it, right? So, but here's the thing, right? Like when you unpack all of this, there's no ill intention there, right? The intention is to have a closer relationship with your child because at some shape, form, and time of your life, you weren't able to connect with your parent. Maybe your parent was the total opposite. Maybe you didn't have that relationship here, so you went like left field extreme.
Mhm.
Maybe you were yearning for that relationship with your parent, right? So you're trying to create that bond, yet there's no balance.
Mhm.
But that stems off the parenting that your parents did that you did not want to do.
That's right. You didn't like it as a kid. That's why I'm saying it was not effective in 1950 and 1920 when those
Mhm,
words were said. You still didn't like them when you were growing up, yet you still are bestowing that on your kids. Now, you can still tell your kids no. And I really should have written a chapter. I have another book coming at some point in time, but it's okay to tell your kids no.
It's actually very healthy to tell your kids no.
It is. And it is healthy because guess what? How many jobs have you tried to get and somebody said no? You don't get that job. You want it, your credit score is not good. Nope, you don't get the car. You can't buy the house. You get told no all over the place. And
Mhm,
so, you know, we're not saying that, you let the kids run and do everything, but communication is the piece about parenting that is definitely just a huge game changer in your parenting role.
mhm,
And Dr. Q and I were talking about this yesterday in my book. There's a couple of chapters where I really talk about communication with your kids. And it's chapter 3, building connections. because we talk about how to connect with our kids in this chapter. The book is set up in early years, middle years, high school years, or I'm sorry, early elementary and adolescent. And, every chapter has those three components in it. So it touches on all of them. And building that connection with your child starts very early. And that starts with having good conversations and learning how to talk to your kids and learning how to listen to your kids. And I really give parents a lot of explanation of, you are the parent, you're guiding this child on their life. You're teaching them how to live their life. And so having the conversation and helping them to understand your whys for saying no for things, your reasons behind it. It takes extra time. It is a lot easier to say, because I said so, Misbha. Now sit back down and eat your peas, right?
I did it. I went and made some chicken. But you're absolutely right. I think, of course, communication is the way to connect, right? And I think that most of us usually know when we're pushing for something that we firmly believe in, or we're pushing just for power and control to make a statement. Right.
Okay,
and when
so
we get caught up in
this
that,
is where Dr. Q comes in. This is definitely her lane, because here's the thing. I'm thinking, when you said that, at that moment, I can have a great conversation with a set of parents about open communication, telling their kids no, instead of just saying, don't talk back, I'm always right, get in the car, my way or the highway, kind of a thing. I can tell them all of this. But until they really get a bird's eye view in, or a laser focused view in of their relationship together as a parent or individually, if they're power hungry or they are in power struggles, that's where she's going to be able to identify that faster than I will. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where the trauma work comes in as well too, right? So one of the things when we were talking about parenting in the trenches, right? We can't have this conversation without talking about generational trauma. We just can't. Each and every one of us has experienced generational trauma, not only on an individual level, a family level, but also community level, on a social level, global level, political level, right? And those things impact us. So whenever I have a parent in front of me that comes in and the child is complaining about, like, oh my God, they don't let me do anything, I'm so over it. When you get to the deep core of that, it's those behaviors are driven by fear and loss of their child. They're always driven by safety.
They
How
are.
do you keep them safe? Whether it's their own trauma around sexual violence, whether it's, again, it's dealing with racism, classism, anything, right? Any social location, right? There's a lot of hate crimes that happen out here. But kids don't understand that until you explain it to them. Like, son, you cannot stay past 10 p.m. and that's pushing it. Because of A, B, and C reasons. Right. Instead, the conversation is like, well, I told you you can't stay past 10 p.m.
Right.
They're not going to be able to connect that unless you actually sit down and explain to them what those fears are.
And the communication is huge. And that is definitely something that is talked in my book about making connections with your kids, because it's important for you to make those connections early on in your child's life. Can you make them at 17 years old? Maybe you haven't had good connections with your kids. Can you start then? You can. It's easier to do it from birth on, to be talking to your kids and taking time to explain things to them, because you are absolutely correct. Most of parents' decisions, when they become angry, they get upset and they're mad or they're yelling and they lose their temper, it is because they are worried about the repercussions. There are consequences greater than what the child can even understand it being, and the consequences doesn't always have to be surrounding completely around the child. I've seen a lot of parents, when I was brick and mortar, parents that had to come up every day, every week to help with their child who was maybe having some behavioral issues. Those parents, they're at risk of losing their jobs. They're probably having problems in the marriage with the fact that there could be, two different views or beliefs in parenting together. And so, there's a lot of stress that's going on even behind the scene of just that one scenario that could be happening for the family that the child doesn't really understand. And they may not be able to conceptualize it anyway at 5 years old, that daddy could lose his job by having to come up here all the time. But, but kind of giving an understanding and talking through some of those things as much as you can with a young child without bestowing your own problems on your child. There's a fine line. This communication is, you don't want to dump too much. You don't want to give kids too much pressure because, they still need to be kids, but they have to understand that some of the things that they're doing are impacting them in a greater way, as well as other people around them also. So it's really important. And I go back into my book. In the very back of my book, there are discussion questions. And I love this one. I talked about it last month. The very first question: why did you decide to become a parent? What do you love most about being a parent? These are some of the questions. Your favorite story. What resources did you use to prepare yourself to become a parent? So what is your recommendation for a new parent? Like, really thinking about these things in our parenting journey is so critically important to be able to do so that we can help raise our children better, so that they have more opportunity. And we're not saying these beliefs like, well, that's how I was raised, that's how you're going to be raised.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that their point of connection, right? Communication. I think it's easier said than done in many ways because it's a skill, right? So, you divided your book up in sections, developmental stages, we can call them, right? Like, so every developmental stage requires a different skill set of parenting.
Right.
Right. And that skill set, again, is learned and you're taught, and it's real life experience as you get older, right? Your child grows, you figure out, okay, this is an effective way of communicating, right? Yet, not everybody has that skill set.
Right.
Right.
So how do you learn that?
Well, first and foremost, you go to therapy.
Okay,
right?
let's go backwards for just a second before we even go to how do you change your skill set. How do you identify that maybe your parenting beliefs aren't working?
How do you identify it? Well, I think even before that, I think the conversation needs to start with the couple that decides they are going to have children. And what does that look like? So, there's exercises that you can do, activities that you can do, like, especially if you're in any form of premarital counseling, right? You ask yourself, like, hey, what are my parenting beliefs, right? What are the forms of discipline that were used on me, right? How was I disciplined, and which method of discipline do I agree with or disagree with? Right? How are we going to reward our kids? What does the reward system look like? Mm-hmm. Right? Who's going to attend what? What are the expectations of attendance? What social events, academic events?
Absolutely. I agree. But what if you didn't have that discussion? And now
which most people don't.
Which most people don't. Most people don't do that. If you're out there listening, have a discussion. Think about these things, because this little human that comes into your life is a life changer, and it's for the better, but it is a life changer. And so you have to be ready and aware for that and be prepared as much as you can. Life is going to throw you things that you're not always prepared for, but that communication piece, that being open, I think those are important things. But yeah, so a lot of times you're going to come into this and you don't even know those answers to the questions. I think it's great what she was saying about before you have kids, have that, but if you didn't, take a minute, get the book and go through the chapters. I always tell parents that the chapters of the book, the questions in the back are timeless, because as your child grows, you're going to go back and re-answer those differently, because your child is going to grow and evolve and is going to need different things from you. They may need more, they may need less. And so going back into that is really important. But if they don't know, take a minute and do some reflecting, thinking about what do I need to do different? What's not working? How about that? That's a great question. I use that a lot. What's not working right now in my life? And thinking about that really. And sometimes it's hard because the thing that you're saying isn't working is not always the thing that you want to admit is not working. Right?
Because that takes courage and it takes curiosity.
Yes.
Right? We've been doing it like this for generations, but it's not working. Right? It takes a form, it takes confidence to be able to say, we're going to stop right here. Yes. We're not going to continue to do this.
Right.
It doesn't serve us anymore.
No. It's tough to do. It's very tough to do. I'm going to write a couple things. Will you talk to them a little bit? I'm going to write these few questions down that we wanted people to think about. And then they can do that. And can you talk a little bit about substance versus trends?
Absolutely. My favorite topic that I cover with my teenage and adolescent kids and parents. All right, guys. So one of the things that I have come to understand, right, through my professional background in working with families is, and I see this consistently in different cultures, right? There's different forms of it. So a lot of times you have parents come in and we are not necessarily seeing eye to eye on the generational gaps that are taking place between the generations, right? And we all know every generation has a gap, right? So if you talk to your parents, I'm pretty sure your parents will be like, these were the things my parents didn't like, right? And then when you talk to your kids, they'll say the same thing. These are the things that my parents didn't like. There's always a generation gap because society evolves and grows. For some for the better, some for the worse, right? So oftentimes with the families that I work with, one of the biggest complaints is things around the teenage adolescent culture that causes problems. So right now, things that come up in the therapy session is social media. OMG. It's always social media. It's always about that phone. It's always about that screen time. It's always about like they're on it. It's TikToks, Instagram. I don't even know. Like, how do you even have a boyfriend or a girlfriend that you've never met? Right? They never leave their room. They're always gaming, right? It's always issues. These are generational gaps, right? Because we don't remember that. I remember playing kickball. I remember playing freeze tag, right? Yeah. I remember going out to camp after school or in the summer. Nowadays, people are just kids are doing things differently. So a lot of times that is what I call the content, right? It's the content of things, and the content can change. Right? But those are also the challenges and the issues that we don't want to focus on because those are trends and trends change. So when we look at parenting, right, and things are coming up in your parenting dynamic that are causing some form of discourse, ask yourself, am I putting too much emotional energy into a trend that will fade.
Mm-hmm.
Am I saying no or not allowing my child to move in a certain way because of a trend, whether it's clothing, whether it's food, whether it's music, dancing, language, social activities,
Mm-hmm.
tattooing, piercings, right?
Yeah.
Those are all trends, and every trend has something different, right? Every culture has different trends, right? So like I'll tell you, like for me, it's a little complicated because I am Muslim, right? So one of the things that that would become an issue is like I couldn't wear sleeveless shirts. Did I wear them? Yeah, absolutely. Are there Pakistani Muslim women that wear sleeveless shirts? Yes, but my parents, we would always have a fight about it. I'm like, why can't I wear sleeveless shirts in America? Please tell me. There are women wearing sleeveless shirts in Pakistan. Nobody's gonna look at my arm, Mom. Seriously. But we would legit have fights over it. I would be so frustrated. But that is a trend, right? Like it's a clothing. It's
Right.
You can change it up, right? And as I got older, I realized that we were just in different places. And if I visited my parents, I had to be respectful of their value.
Mm-hmm.
So in saying this, when you're thinking about parenting, right? Think about making a decision or going and communicating in a way or setting some boundary. Ask yourself, is this a trend, or is it's something of substance and of value?
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer is it's a trend, then you probably don't need to spend that much emotional energy on it. But if it's something of value and of substance, that's where you set your grounding. So, for example, what would be a value?
Mm-hmm.
And a value would be education.
Mm-hmm.
So, when your kid comes home with bad grades or they're not doing what they're supposed to do and you have to provide consequences, that is a value. That's not a trend.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you can put your foot down and be like, you are not going out to this party because you need to bring up your grades.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. I love that. And I've never really framed it like that. I think that is a great way to frame it. Again, I always go to the communication side. You want to color your hair purple, the whole head, right? This was, my daughter wanted this. And I said, I want to explain to you before we make this decision what that entails for your whole head of black hair. Like I wanted her to understand that this is a process that was going to, really take a few steps and take some steps to get back to another color that she wanted it to be. And, once I really kind of explained my reasoning behind it and, why I asked her to wait a little bit longer to think about it, we tried some other kind of not permanent dyes. She didn't end up loving it, which I kind of knew she wasn't going to end up loving it, but we talked about it. You know what I mean? We talked through it. It wasn't a no, this isn't how we do it. I can't allow this. It was, let's talk about it. I remember when my daughters wanted to get a piercing, and I was against it. And I really very much felt like I didn't want them to have this on their body at 15 years old. I was very worried about them making a decision of something so young. And so my kids decided to write me a letter. They went and did research. They went and did research. They wrote an essay. They had it all organized.
They showed up like the kids of an educator.
I mean, they did, right? They just said, well, I'm going to just keep going at her until she lets me do it. And I forget what age I let them do it. I don't know if it was 16 or whatever, but, and it was a trend. One of them still has it. One of them doesn't, and they have other peers. I mean, it was a trend, but in the moment, and this is what I want to express for parents to this, in the moment, parents, this is hard sometimes. It is hard to change your belief or to, think that your beautiful child wants to have a tattoo sleeve up their arm. And you're like, but you were my baby, right? This is where parents' hearts come in. Like, but you were my baby and you were this or you were that. And,
Your body's our temple.
Right, exactly. And so those things are hard sometimes. And so, thinking about how is the best way to react, how do you have the conversation, how can you talk about those types of things? Like there's so many pieces like that because these things are going to come up. And that's what I'm saying. We talked about ways that you can be prepared to be a parent and plan for all of this and that, but things are going to pop up that are trends that you're not even going to be ready to receive. You're not going to know anything about it, And then how do you handle that? Do you react and go right back to your belief because it's safe and it's what you know? Or do you open your mind and you ask some questions and you have a conversation, you talk through it with your kids, you build that relationship with them. There's just a lot of steps that it takes, and it takes time. You're not going to be able to build this relationship with your kids all of a sudden. It takes years, it takes practice, it takes trial and error, it takes therapy, I mean, I'm an educator. I'm definitely not saying I'm perfect. I've been to therapy. My children have been to therapy for many years. It's a great place to go. It's a wonderful place to go and really learn about yourself, to learn other tools, to learn other strategies, And I had a belief that I had to be everything as a mom. And I remember going to therapy, and I don't know if I wrote this in my book or not, but I remember having a lot of stress about getting to work and getting to work on time. I was a lead teacher at the time. I had a lot of responsibility. I had to get my kids to school, one to daycare, be out the door by 7:30 a.m. That's a lot. And probably we had the dog and I had the husband gone, like there was a lot happening by 7:30 a.m. And I remember telling my therapist, I can't get them breakfast because guess what? A good mom makes sure their kids have breakfast out the door, right? That was my belief, right? My mom didn't work full time. And so I always had a nice breakfast before I left for school. So I should do that. And she said, what would happen if your kids didn't get breakfast out the door? And I was like, well, I guess they could eat at school. Yeah, breakfast at school, Tanya. And I said, and she goes, what if they didn't get breakfast at school? I said, she goes, they'd get lunch. I'm like, yeah. She's like, can they just get a granola bar on the way out the door if they want it? I'm like, yeah, good idea. But I mean, that's just as simple as a parenting belief that can really harbor inside of you. And here I am an educator at this time of 15 years, and I'm still, learning about how to be a parent.
Mm-hmm.
So
that is a great example of your day-to-day nuances around parenting, right? But also how our beliefs are so intertwined with the social messages we get, which defines what a good mom is and a bad mom.
We do not have time for this conversation. You are so right. It is so true.
Right? Like,
yes.
Like the reality is, yeah, okay, so if your kids don't get breakfast, are you going to be a bad mom? But you internalize that there was something about that message where that became your belief until your therapist challenged you.
Until she said, you're okay, Tanya, you're doing a pretty good job. They're going to be all right.
Right. But it goes back to what we talked about last month, which was one of the myths, right? Mm-hmm. We talked about working moms, right? Or working parents. You're a better parent if you stay at home.
Right.
No, you're not.
No. Right.
No, you're not. So,
exactly.
But these are the ways that our parenting beliefs or any form of beliefs are formed by seeing, right? By societal messages, family messages, gender dynamics, right? Especially when it comes to parenting, right? Mm-hmm. Parenting is, again, a lifetime commitment. It is not just a degree that you go on for 4 years.
No.
It is a lifetime commitment.
It is. It really, really is. And it continues on for many years. So we have a couple of questions. Let's leave you with a couple of these. And, we talked about this one a little bit. What is a parenting belief that you had to grow in? Maybe that you lived with. So thinking about that. So as you're wrapping this up today, these are some things that maybe you could put in a notebook. What is a parenting belief that you had to grow in? Another one
Can
that's, no, go
can I
ahead.
just give an example of that?
Please. Yes.
And I want to do that because I want to honor my parents as parents who are no longer with us. So as I look at their growth process, and this is a belief that I know people have heard before in different cultures, parents don't apologize.
We did talk
And
about that.
they know dead wrong they did something wrong. They don't apologize. You're just supposed to be like, they're sorry, they made you food and they bought you some clothes. That's their apology, right?
Right.
But that was an area of growth for my parents, especially my father. And I was so proud of him
Oh, that's neat.
for apologizing for some of the things, the traumas that we had experienced, and just kind of dismantling patriarchy and moving in a certain way when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And they would say sorry and they would say, I love you.
Those two pieces are huge. I mean, they really are. They're really huge to say those things. Kids want to hear them every day. And I shared a story last time as well about being a 50-year-old being told I love you by my mom and how impactful that is. And it's impactful to anybody that we talk to. And, give the time and attention that it takes, say, I love you, and
Mm-hmm.
tell them why you love them. And as well as saying, I'm sorry. Parents, it's okay. We are going to make a mistake. I have made my fair share of them. And please know that in my book, this is not the Tania is the queen of the parenting. This is Tania's successes and failures in here as parents, of the mistakes that I made and the things that were hard for me, the things that went well for me, and sharing out, hopefully you learn from some of those things to make your experience better. And so, saying that you're sorry is important to do to your kids because we do make mistakes and that's okay.
Absolutely. And it's role modeling.
It is. It really is. You're teaching your kids. Again, you are there. If they don't hear you say you're sorry, they're not going to be able to turn around and tell somebody else that they're sorry. Yeah. And how have your beliefs changed your parenting? So, and this could be evolving. Maybe you've evolved a little bit as a parent already. But how have your beliefs changed your parenting? I think is important. But I love this one the most. The one I wanted to spend the most time for you reflecting on is what are some ways you can grow and change your parenting style? And so I hope you come back and attend more of these sessions with myself and Dr. Qureshi because we are bringing topics to light every month. We're here on the last Tuesday of every month. And we'll be talking about different parenting strategies, skills, styles, child development, those types of things that are going to help you with your parenting style. And, it might be refreshing to your kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I think.
Or surprising. Depending on what your style is, it could be surprising.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that one of the other piece that I want people to kind of take away from and think about is often I see that with parenting, right, we develop certain patterns where we don't even notice that we're doing it. So for example, saying no to something because your child is always asking for something, right? So you immediately are like, nope, 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 right? Because they're always asking. And I think it's really important to reflect on that because you really have to ask yourself, why am I saying no? What is the reason here, right? Because that in itself can help eliminate some of the disconnection, right? And that also requires, like you said earlier, it's communication and an understanding that my parents' time is valuable. And these are the things that they're willing to do for me in these constraints. And you as a parent have to realize you can't avail yourself to your children all the time either.
Right.
because they take advantage of it, which is why you find yourself in a situation saying no, because now they think you're their chauffeur.
Exactly.
And you have no life, right?
That's right. That's right.
So this is where the open communication comes in, but also age appropriate behaviors and social activities. Okay. You are allowed to go out and spend time with your friends twice a week, one weekend night and one weekday. Which ones do you want it to be?
Yeah.
You can't just pop out of nowhere. Hey, mom, can you take me somewhere? Hey, dad, can you drop me off? No, it's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
So it all goes back to discipline. It goes back to setting boundaries, reaffirming, right? So that you're not caught up in this pattern of like chaos, let's just say, or conflict, because that can be draining in itself.
And
So
yes, and you're making me think of the timing too. Oftentimes kids approach us at the most inopportune time, right? And so we're quick to say no. So think about that too, instead of just no. Maybe I'm walking in the door. Maybe I need 5 minutes. Maybe I'm in the middle of making dinner. Like, let's find a way that we can talk about this later. I can't give you that time and attention now. So just really opening up your mind, opening up your heart to your parenting. I'm going to go ahead and show this real quick. I think I am. I don't know what I'm doing here. So, see, I knew that was going to go over our head. So this is the copy of the book, Raising the Well-Adjusted Child, A Parent's Manual. If you go to Amazon and just search for Dr. Tania Farran, all my books come up there, and you can take a look at it there and grab your copy of it and get started working on the back, and then join us next month. We are going to
do you remember the topic for next month yet?
We do have a topic for next month.
And guys, if you have any topics, anything in particular that comes up that you find yourself talking about with your co-parenting friends, right?
With your co-parenting friends.
Shoot us a message, either Dr. Tania or myself on LinkedIn. We'll definitely put it on the agenda.
Yeah.
We love hearing from you. We love participation.
We do. I think we're talking about finding your village. Finding your village. That'll be fun.
Yep.
That will be
so
fun.
With that, guys, it's a wrap for us. I do want to say, two last things. Again, thank you so much for supporting us. And, it just gives me a lot of excitement. And I'm hoping we will have a book out from these topics as well. And with that, please, please, please take care of yourself out there. I got really sick last week. COVID's going around, the flu, A, B, RSV. Take care of yourself, wear your masks. And the month of Ramadan is coming very, very quickly around the corner. So to all my Muslim friends out there, let's celebrate this month. Let's pray for each other, and let's hope that we have a brighter future ahead of us.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody, for watching. This has been a pleasure. Dr. Qureshi, thanks for joining me today. We'll be together the end of the month in March talking about building your parenting village. So everyone, have a great rest of your evening. Take care. Bye now.
Take care. Bye-bye.